their Medicare payments that they were having to make. So being able to really be a lot more, a lot more realistic about what the needs are, and for Social Security to be able to fulfill its mandate.
Last question.
Hi, I'm Joe.
Hi, Joe.
Sorry, I'm Joe from Portland. So at a town hall last week in Concord, you said that you don't see a future in our country as being a socialist nation. I want to know more about why you thought that, because you talk a lot about reallocating the defense budget to help welfare programs here. But you also talk about how you said today how the government is governed for the elite and by the elite. I was wondering how you can trust corporations going forward in a capitalist economy that we have now, when like a lot of wars that you've spoken out against have been able to benefit defense contractors and other companies of the sort, and like clean drinking water in Flint. I was wondering how you can trust corporations to actually help with those things, and why you don't see the future in America as a socialist nation.
I think it's looking at the reality of this mixed kind of society that we have here. So my statement was about a purely socialist form of governance. That's not what our Constitution is based in. I don't just blindly trust that, you know, whether it's Boeing or Lockheed Martin or Monsanto or Syngenta is just going to do the right thing because they want to do the right thing. That's not what this is about. It's about recognizing that government has a very specific role to play in ensuring the defense of our country, and making sure that we are funding our local firefighters and law enforcement officers, 2 of which are here tonight taking care of us, making sure that our trash gets picked up, making sure that our streets are safe and that our kids are getting a good education. Some in this room may have a debate about which of those is a legitimate role of government. That's fine, we can have that debate. But government is in the business of providing essential services to the people of our country. And some would say that, oh, yeah, that's a little bit socialist. I also believe that in our that our economy is based on the concepts of capitalism, that we have entrepreneurship, innovation. Small businesses are the driver and backbone of our economy, and that's a good thing. The real problem is crony capitalism, and the system that we have set up today in the pay-to-play culture in Washington that says if you're Amazon or you're GM or you're one of these multi-billion-dollar corporations, you can afford the highest paid, most powerful lobbyists in Washington to influence the laws that are written, to influence the tax code, to make it so you can get away with paying 0 taxes, while the mom and pop small business owners of a coffee shop or the local diner are struggling, paying their fair share, trying to take care of their employees and provide that service to their community. This is the issue of the crony capitalism, the issue of large pesticide manufacturers who, because of their influence in this administration, are getting the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, to turn a blind eye and not even look at the pesticides that they are dumping across our land and the negative impact that they are having not only on soil quality and the ability for us to know in this country where we have amazing and rich soil that has grown food to feed people across generations, that it is a threat to that. It's a threat to bees that pollinate these plants that help us stay fed, but it's also a direct threat in poisoning and having a negative impact on kids in those communities. It's poisoning our waters. It's polluting our air. So no, this is not about just trusting corporations. It's rooting out the crony capitalism in this country that makes sure that we have a sensible role for government to play to protect consumers, to make sure that our taxpayer dollars are being spent in the way that actually serves our country's best interest, while also allowing for a thriving economy that's rooted in the kind of innovation and entrepreneurship that really is synonymous with the founding of our country and the success that we've seen here and around the world. No problem. I can see you.
Laura. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., Tacoma Park, Washington. And it's kind of a dual question that I'm real concerned about is California is economy and the number of people that live there is like the 5th largest economy in the world, I think, or 6th. And yet they don't have, as electing senators, they don't have the same voice. You know, they don't have any more voice as senators, 2 senators, than Wyoming that doesn't, I think, doesn't even have 1 million people.
That's true.
You know, places like that, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, those kind of places. And how in the world can that be changed? The system and the new, I call it a new world order, doesn't want that change. And then the other question has to do with, I don't think you, or I didn't understand the answer to term limits. Like,
oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah.
I forgot to answer that. I can talk about that.
If you could address
yeah,
that,
sure.
is with the Supreme Court and the people like Susan Collins here. In 20 years, she has not met with her constituents.
Wow.
No town hall meeting by Susan Collins. She's afraid of her constituents. And she doesn't, I don't think, represents the people of Maine. So I wish you would address those 2. And immigration, if you can get to it.
That all of those questions is the whole town hall right there. I'll try my best to get through as many of these as quickly as I can. I don't know if I fully understood your question about California, but I'll answer it to the best of my ability. It is massive. It is massive. No. I fully understand California. California is diverse. It's huge, high population, booming economy. I don't think that they should have more senators than any other state. They have more members of the House of Representatives than any other state. And this was how our founders envisioned trying to bring about this balance and the difference between the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. That my teeny tiny home state of Hawaii, a chain of islands the most remote of any in the world, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, would have just as much of a voice in determining the policies of our country as the 2 senators who represent states like California. Look at the House of Representatives. We have 2 members of Congress from Hawaii, Wyoming, South Dakota, other states, I think Rhode Island, those who have less than 1 million people, they have 1 member of the House of Representatives. California, does anyone know? It's like 30, how many? 50, yeah, 30, 50, something like that. They've got a lot. I mean, and they use that power in the House of Representatives, that when it comes down to creating a coalition, California has the ability to be a swing block vote if they choose to use it that way. Me and my colleague from Hawaii, little bit less. We got to build more coalitions, and honestly, we talk to and work a lot with members from California, members from other states. So that's the answer to that question. Term limits. I think that, look, I think this is a debate we should have in a country, in this country. There are clear advantages that the incumbents have that make it very difficult for the original intent of these elections to say, well, if you don't like somebody, you can just fire them. Easier said than done when you have an incumbent who largely relies on PAC and lobbyist support to maintain their power, to maintain these political war chests, versus a candidate that may be running from the local community, hasn't worked in politics, but has a lot of grassroots support, but who can't afford to put ads up on television. So I think it's really a 2-pronged question. And I've heard from people who feel both ways, that, okay, there should be, let's say, maybe is it 2 terms in the Senate is enough, or should it be 4 terms? How long is enough for you to know that you've got someone who's representing you, who is able to kind of learn the ropes and the ins and outs to be able to get stuff done in the Senate. But then when does that become too long? It's a good question. Others have said, well, I met a woman. She said, my member of Congress has been serving me for 25 years, and I really, really, really love the work he's doing, that he's always in the community. I can pick up the phone and call him or knock on his door, know that we can have a conversation. I don't want him to be arbitrarily thrown out of office. So this is a conversation that we need to have in tandem with the issue of money in politics. I'll get to you. I got you. Don't worry. In tandem with the issue of getting this big special interest money out of politics, members of Congress should be limited to accepting contributions from you, the American people, alone. That's it. No PACs, no lobbyists, no corporations, just you. That would change so much. It would change so much. We had a briefing within the first few weeks after getting elected. There were 50 new Democrats in 2012 elected, 34 new Republicans, and we were invited to go to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the group that's responsible for electing Democrats into the House. And we got a briefing there that one of the slides said, here's what you can expect your typical day to look like. And I wish I had a copy of it with me, but it went something like this. 2-hour fundraiser breakfast with lobbyists, 3 hours of fundraising phone calls, 2.5 hours of committees and votes, another fundraising lunch with lobbyists, 3 more hours of fundraising calls, 1 hour of votes, followed by another 2.5 hour fundraising dinner with more lobbyists. I'm not exaggerating. So when you take all of that out of the equation, and even if you replaced all those fundraising calls, if the only people they're calling is you, I think that's a pretty good thing. Knowing who they're accountable to. There are other reforms that we need to make to close this revolving door of corruption in Washington to address this issue. The Supreme Court. I don't think that just expanding the numbers of seats on the Supreme Court will solve anything, because it doesn't get to the heart of the problem here, which is that our courts have become politicized. Term limits for the Supreme Court?
How many lifetime terms would you like them to serve? They only serve one. They only serve one lifetime. Yes. How many of them would you like them to be limited to? How many lifetimes did they have?
Sounds like this is a conversation we need to have. But again, so you can have the debate about whether or not Supreme Court justices should have term limits or if they should be lifetime appointments. But either way, that's not going to solve the problem of our courts being politicized to where once someone is nominated to serve in this position, we have gotten so far away from the place where Ruth Bader Ginsburg was nominated by President Clinton. And she received, in a divided Senate, something, I think, 94 votes to confirm, a strong bipartisan vote to support her confirmation, because clearly she was qualified to fill that position. Fast forward to where we are today, what we've seen under the Obama administration and this administration, the nominee is, the outcome of that nominee is predetermined based on party, essentially, where you don't have the same kind of examination and vetting of really looking, okay, well, you can be nominated by a president of the opposing party, but I'm going to ask you the questions that really get to the point of saying, are you going to be a fair arbiter of justice, liberty and justice for all, as per our Constitution? Or are you just going to be another political hack for whichever party you represent? That is the root cause of the problems that we're seeing with the politicization of the courts that we need to solve. And that term limits alone or expanding the court alone, that's not going to solve that problem.
The people are the problem in government.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you.
I'm really not good about this stuff, but can I read to you what I wrote?
Sure, just hold the mic up to your mouth. There you go.
So as an independent voter, a mother, and a co-founder of an innovative and disruptive small business that works within the space and defense industry and conducts extensive open source intelligence gathering and analysis, I can personally attest to the pervasive greed-driven corruption you speak of within the military-industrial complex, and that which you speak of within big oil and big tech industries, which are collectively working to undermine the well-being, civil liberties, and national security of our country. So on behalf of many of my fellow colleagues, many of which are veterans, active duty military members, and have been or are being needlessly put directly in harm's way, on behalf of our country's nation-building agenda, I applaud you for your authentic service and dedication to our country, and for drawing attention to the money and power-driven agenda of the global elites that has been destroying and pillaging our nation for far too long. So my twofold question for you is, will you seek to reform or repeal the Patriot Act, and should your efforts to reverse the nation's agenda dictating the continuance of the deeply harmful agenda I just referred to result in a massive loss of jobs or trigger a market crash, how will you prevent another too-big-to-fail scenario from unfolding that would throw many middle-class Americans into poverty, as did the last bailout?
So to be clear, your second question was about the banks,
Yeah,
financial industry.
the too-big-to-fail
Okay,
kind
I
of
got
scenario
you.
unfolding, and then having to, when the markets crash, which has been repeatedly happening throughout
Yeah.
For many decades.
Yeah.
Will that continue? How do we
Yeah.
ameliorate that impact on our society?
Thank you. Two great questions, and thank you for bringing your experience to share your own voice on these issues that we're talking about. I really appreciate it, and obviously brings your own credibility and affirmation to both the truth of what we're dealing with and the challenges that we're up against. The Patriot Act, as you well know, is up for reauthorization next month. I think we need to both repeal and reform the Patriot Act. Because of the many provisions put into that Patriot Act in the wake of 9/11 that very directly undermine our constitutional rights and privacy and civil liberties, and how big the challenge is in Congress, where unfortunately we hear the same kind of fear tactics being pushed forward anytime we raise these issues of civil liberties and privacy, and how we as voters, we the people, should not ever have to choose between being safe and being free. They are not diametrically opposed objectives. That once again, our founders had the foresight to recognize that we could have people in positions of power in our own government who might seek to erode our own freedoms for either their interests or, quote unquote, in the pursuit of security, which is why they said, if you want to come and surveil us as Americans or collect our own private and personal information, you got to have a warrant. It has to be for cause. So this is something, and there's a bipartisan coalition. We formed the Fourth Amendment Caucus in Congress, and we are working as we speak to try to bring about some of these changes, since the Patriot Act is looking to be reauthorized. I would just ask all of you to help us in doing so, because what we have heard over the years as we have continued this work to protect our civil liberties and privacy is speeches on the House floor criticizing our efforts, saying, you just want to allow another 9/11 style attack to happen in this country. That if we are able to be successful in passing our legislation, then it is an open door for terrorists to come to America. It's these empty fear tactics that are being used, that we've seen them over and over and over again, not only in the post 9/11 era, but you've seen similar tactics being used in the past to help shore up the security state that so blatantly disregards our country's Constitution. Your second question is really, really important. all of these questions have been amazing and important, but it's something that not a lot of people are talking about because it's easy to say, well, look, our economy is prospering, stocks are going up, GDP is going up, all of which are good things, but there is a deeper instability within our financial markets that people working in finance are really, really concerned about. The fact that those banks that were too big to fail in 2008 are even bigger today. And they are counting on the fact that not if, but when there is a collapse and failure, that we as taxpayers will once again bail them out because they're too big to fail. So it's understanding this. First of all, that's important. Understanding why it's critical that we reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act to help shore up and protect ourselves, to make sure that these big banks are not able to gamble with our money and that they're separating commercial banking from the other banking practices that they are doing, but also that we recognize what went wrong in 2008. No one's been held accountable. And because we as taxpayers bailed out these big banks, even as there was no bailout for the people who lost their pensions, who lost their homes, who lost everything, we as taxpayers bailed out these banks, not allowing those who deserved to fail, and those who were doing the right thing, who had the resilience to persist, have created this shallow and shaky ground that we are faced with today.